Imagine for a moment that everything around you, every circumstance, every stuck place, every open door, is quietly answering to something inside of you. Not in some abstract philosophical sense, but in a clear and consistent law. The moment you become still enough to see it, something in you begins to shift. Not because the world changes first, but because you see that it never had the power to begin with. As Emmet Fox once taught, the secret of life is not found in the outer, but in the inner. The world is plastic to the molding power of thought. What you hold consistently and deeply becomes what you live, not by magic, not by chance, but by law. So before we journey inward, I invite you to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with your soul. Let's begin with the turning point, the silent, pivotal moment where everything begins to change, not through force, but through perception. It doesn't happen with fanfare. It doesn't need to. It arrives like a whisper you can't unhear. You are not the victim of the world you see. And in that realization, the scaffolding of confusion begins to tremble. Because you've tried willpower, you've tried control, you've tried waiting for the storm to pass so you could finally feel peace. But now, for the first time, you consider something radical. What if peace is not what follows change? What if peace is what causes it? This is the essence of belief, not passive agreement, not surface-level positivity. Belief, in its rawest form, is decision. A quiet declaration that what I accept inwardly must shape what I experience outwardly. And from that moment on, the game changes. You stop blaming the shadows and start tracing the light. This doesn't mean pretending. This isn't about denying pain, difficulty, or confusion. It means that within every challenge, there is something waiting to be reclaimed, an awareness, a power, a center of gravity that has been buried beneath false conclusions. You begin to see that the outer is a mirror. It reflects the dominant vibration of your thought, your expectation, your emotional tone. Not always immediately, but always precisely. Life becomes a canvas that cannot lie to you, it only echoes, and that's where the power returns to you. Because if the world reflects belief, then the most revolutionary act you can take is to revise your belief, not to fix the outer picture by force, but to change the signal you're sending to it. It starts small. Maybe it's the moment you stop rehearsing what went wrong. Maybe it's when you stop defining yourself by the loss, the delay, or the label someone gave you. Maybe it's when you say, I'm done waiting for something to change. I'm becoming the one who changes. That moment, quiet, internal, almost invisible to anyone else, is the true pivot point of transformation. It's where you stop handing over your spiritual authority. You realize that your attention is not a neutral thing. It's creative. It has power. And wherever you consistently place it, life begins to conform. The key word here is consistency. You've had flashes of belief before, moments of clarity. Maybe during a book, a walk, a conversation, you felt the shift, the opening, the light. But the real test, the alchemy of awakening, is not what you feel once. It's what you return to over and over again, what you claim when the feelings fade, what you anchor into when the old patterns scream louder, because that's when the real battle is won. The light that never fails is not a dramatic thunderbolt. It's the quiet, steady flame of realization that refuses to go out, even when the winds of doubt blow hardest. And that light lives in you, right now. You don't need to earn it. You don't need to wait for permission. You only need to stop agreeing with the illusion that you are separate from it. Most people never make this turn. They wait for life to improve so they can believe again. But belief doesn't come after the evidence. It produces the evidence. That's what makes it holy. That's what makes it powerful. It requires you to step into truth before the world confirms it. You'll be tempted to go back to old explanations, to say, but this happened, or they did this, or I tried already. That's understandable. That's human. But the soul doesn't transform through the repetition of what went wrong. It transforms by seeing that what was doesn't define what is becoming. So the question isn't, will life give me what I want? The question is, will I become the kind of consciousness that allows it? And when you do, when you take even the smallest inward step in that direction, the law begins to respond. Not because you begged, not because you suffered long enough, but because that's what law does. It responds to the state you're in. This is the silent turning point. When you stop wrestling with the outer and start aligning with the inner. When you realize that the root of every problem is a thought out of alignment with truth, and the solution is always to return to that alignment, no matter how many times it takes. This isn't about perfection, it's about presence. You begin to see how often you've been living from reaction rather than intention, how often you've believed that fear was being realistic, when in fact it was just being repeated. But now something deeper is calling you. Not a new technique, not a shiny promise, but a deep soul-level invitation to believe again, not in anything outside of you, but in the power that lives within. And that, more than anything, is where the light begins. Because once you make that turn, even the smallest one, you are no longer the same. There is a law behind every outcome, a pattern beneath every result. No matter how scattered your world may seem, no matter how unfair or chaotic the events of your life have been, the deeper truth remains. Nothing unfolds by accident. Life responds, not randomly, not emotionally, but precisely, to the beliefs you hold and the identity you operate from. This is not a punishment. It's not karma in disguise. It's not the universe keeping score. It's law, spiritual law. And once you see that, you stop trying to manipulate appearances and start working with principles. The law of belief is one such principle. It doesn't care what you believe. It simply carries out whatever is most alive in your consciousness. If you believe in lack, it shows up. If you believe in timing that always fails you, it arranges delays. If you believe in the inevitability of good, doors begin to open with no logical explanation. The law does not interpret. It does not weigh morality. It mirrors. It obeys. It reflects whatever you sustain and energize within your mind. And yes, it operates whether you know about it or not. Just as gravity pulls without your permission, this law moves according to the tone of your awareness. You don't need to like it, but you must recognize it. Because whether you're aware of it or not, it's already shaping the fabric of your experience. You can trace your outcomes not just to the things you say, but to the beliefs you live inside of, the tone of your reactions, the conclusions you've drawn about yourself when no one's looking, the definitions you accepted when you were younger and never questioned again. These shape your conditions over time, like water shaping stone. It's easy to think that what happens to you is a result of what others did, what society allows, or what circumstances prevent. And yes, the world has structures and timing and tides. But underneath all that, there is an inner gatekeeper, a filter that determines what you see, what you interpret, and what you expect. And that filter is your belief. The law doesn't respond to what you want in moments of clarity. It responds to what you believe when you're not trying. It reflects the version of reality you assume to be normal. Not just consciously, but unconsciously, emotionally, habitually. And that's where your power lies, because you've been shaping your life already, even if unknowingly. And now with awareness, you can begin to do it deliberately, lovingly, wisely. You might ask, but if the law always responds, why do I experience things I don't believe in? And the answer is, you likely do believe in them, just not consciously. You might carry hidden beliefs from your upbringing, from past wounds, from cultural repetition. You might mentally reject an idea while still emotionally expecting it. Remember, the law responds not to your words, but to your dominant emotional expectation. This is why people can pray for healing, but secretly expect illness. Why they can affirm abundance while deeply fearing the future. Why they say they want love, but walk with the assumption that they're unworthy of it. The law answers the vibration beneath the words. This isn't to shame you, it's to empower you. Because once you understand what the law responds to, you're no longer at its mercy. You become its partner. You learn to notice what you assume, what you tolerate, what you habitually picture when no one else is around. That's the level where transformation takes root. Not in fleeting thoughts, but in your emotional convictions. It can be subtle. The belief that things always fall apart eventually. The belief that I never get chosen. The belief that people like me don't get that kind of life. These aren't conscious affirmations, but they run like background scripts, quietly telling the law what to produce next. And yet, just as these were built, they can be rebuilt. No belief is permanent, no emotional pattern is final, no inner narrative is beyond revision, but it must be revised intentionally. Repetition, visualization, emotional rehearsal, these are not gimmicks. They're how the mind adopts new standards. The law doesn't care how long you've held a belief, it simply begins to shift the moment your conviction does. So take a closer look, not just at what you say you want, but at what you truly expect. Examine the places where outcomes seem to repeat themselves. These are not signs of fate. They are signs of inner programming asking to be rewritten. You've been told that belief is just mental assent, that it's soft, even vague, but nothing could be more mistaken. Belief is precision. It is emotional tone, repeated image, silent expectation. It is the signal you broadcast to the law of life, and that law is always listening. You don't need to convince it, you only need to tune it. This is why we must stop chasing outcomes and start mastering assumptions. The outcomes will take care of themselves when the inner weather changes. Because it is the inner weather that drives all growth. When you change the atmosphere of your mind, new seeds begin to take root without force, without struggle. This is not theory, it's structure. So the question is no longer, is the law real? It's, am I working with it consciously or by default? Because it's not waiting to be activated, it's already active, right now. And you're already using it, right now. Every complaint is a form of prayer. Every assumption is a blueprint. Every deeply held conclusion is a command. And once you understand that, you begin to build rather than react. You begin to direct rather than fear. You begin to stand inside your own mind as the authority it's been waiting for. Because when the law is always on, you must always choose what it receives. And that choice begins now. Hope waits, belief moves. That is the line few ever cross. Because hope feels noble, it lets you postpone despair without asking much in return. It whispers, maybe one day. It comforts, it holds your hand. But it doesn't change outcomes. Not because hope is weak, but because hope is not belief. Belief, by contrast, commits. It takes a stand inside your consciousness and declares, this is real now, even before it appears. And the moment you do that, not as wishful thinking, not as performance, but as actual inner acceptance, the law begins to rearrange. Hope is passive. Belief is generative. You may have been taught that belief is soft, poetic, or even vague, but that's not the belief that reshapes lives. The belief that alters the substance of your experience is built on clarity, focus, and depth. It doesn't wait for proof, it becomes the proof. It doesn't ask for reassurance, it walks forward as if what is unseen has already landed. That's not delusion, that's spiritual alignment. So many suffer because they're stuck in the gap between hope and belief. They speak words of light, but they rehearse images of loss. They pray for change, then assume disappointment. They say, I believe, while checking for signs that it's not working. That's not belief, it's hesitation wrapped in spiritual language. And the law cannot respond to hesitation. It only responds to conviction. To believe means you shift your inner position. You stop saying, I hope this happens, and start embodying the tone of someone for whom it has already begun. You stop visiting the vision like a daydream and begin living inside it like it's your new emotional residence. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to fake confidence. It means choosing your internal footing and returning to it over and over again, especially when doubt whispers. The truth is, hope is easier. Hope lets you delay responsibility. Belief asks you to participate in your own transformation. Hope looks outward for change. Belief asks, who are you being right now, and does that match what you say you want? That's a deeper demand, but it's also a deeper power. When you believe something, you stop chasing it. You begin to prepare for it. Your emotional system starts to organize around it. You interpret events differently. You bounce back from setbacks faster. You no longer ask if it's possible. You ask what version of yourself must show up to match the thing you've declared. And in that shift, the law of life responds. You stop testing. You stop waiting for signs to feel safe. You begin to feel safe because you have chosen alignment. You begin to radiate steadiness, not as an act, but as a state. And that steadiness is magnetic. It draws new outcomes because it signals a different level of consciousness. There is nothing arrogant about true belief. It is not prideful. It is not demanding. It is rooted still, powerful. It has no need to announce itself because it knows, and that knowing cuts through confusion like a blade through fog. This is what Emmet Fox pointed to when he said, "You must not think your prayers are unanswered simply because things remain the same. The change begins within you, and then the world catches up." Hope waits for the world. Belief shifts the self. You may remember moments in your life where something changed the very moment you stopped pleading and started assuming. That wasn't luck. That was alignment. You met the law in its native language, certainty, and that certainty began building the bridge beneath your feet. Even now, the outcomes you long for are not being kept from you. They are held in suspension, waiting for you to become the version of yourself that can carry them. That's the real work. So pause, not to hope harder, but to examine what you've truly chosen to believe. Have you decided on your good, or are you still watching, wondering, waiting? Because until you decide, the law reads your hesitancy as your order. And it fulfills that too. This isn't to blame, it's to liberate, because the moment you turn that key, the shift begins. It doesn't require drama. It doesn't require tears. It only requires a new stance. I am done waiting. I am now believing. And from that place, your energy begins to organize. Your actions start to align. The synchronicities you once hoped for become the natural byproduct of inner resonance. People will call it coincidence, but you'll know. You'll know that when you shifted inwardly, the world didn't take long to mirror it. So let this section be your permission, not to hope more, but to believe differently. You don't need evidence to begin. You only need the willingness to release the question mark and replace it with a period. Not, what if this works? But this is working. Not, will it come? But I now live as one for whom it has arrived. That is the language the law understands. And it is available to you right now, not in theory, not in the future, but in this very breath. The day you stop waiting for something outside you to convince you is the day the law begins to bring that something toward you. Because the world doesn't give you what you hope for, it gives you what your belief says is already yours. The world you see is not the starting point. It is the result. The origin of every condition, every circumstance, every repeated pattern in your life can be traced to one place: thought. Thought is the first cause. It is the invisible substance that shapes the visible, not in metaphor, not as an ideal, but as law. The mistake most people make is to treat thought as passive, something that happens to them, something they react to, rather than choose. But thought is not a background hum. It is a mold, a blueprint, a silent command issued to the substance of life. You are thinking all day long. The question is not whether you're thinking, but whether your thinking is clear, intentional, and aligned with the life you say you desire. There is no neutral thought. Every idea held in mind carries a creative charge. It either reinforces what is, or it opens the way for what can be. Each thought sets a vibration, and sustained vibration becomes reality. The law of belief responds not to occasional glimpses of insight, but to the tone of your thinking over time. If you accept this, not as a slogan but as structure, you begin to take responsibility at a different level. You stop reacting to results and start tracing them backward. You ask, what kind of thinking brought this about? And more importantly, what kind of thinking am I willing to hold now? Because thought is not random, it is selected. Whether consciously or through repetition, you allow certain patterns to take root. And once rooted, those patterns begin to create expectations, emotional reactions, and ultimately, conditions. This is the law of mind in action, not as punishment, not as reward, but as cause and effect. You were not taught this. You were taught that life happens from the outside in, that others decide, that luck prevails, that history defines you. But none of that is original to the soul. It's programming, and it can be rewritten. You are not a passive receiver. You are a thinker, a projector, a transmitter. And every day your thoughts are shaping the clay of experience, not instantly, but steadily. Some will ask, but if thought is the cause, why do I think positive and still experience struggle? The answer lies in what kind of thought you're using. Is it shallow positivity or deep conviction? Is it momentary inspiration or a sustained internal atmosphere? Most people's minds are full of mixed signals. They affirm strength, but dwell in fear. They visualize success, but expect resistance. They speak words of light, but rehearse old wounds. That's not thinking clearly. That's internal contradiction. And the law responds to the dominant thread, not the occasional spark. To truly work with thought as first cause, you must begin to guard your mind, not from the world, but from default thinking. You must become conscious of what you dwell on, what you repeat, what you imagine. Because imagination is rehearsal, it is not harmless, it is creative. When you imagine the worst, you're not preparing, you're constructing. When you review old pain, you're not just remembering, you're renewing the pattern. And when you allow worry to become your dominant emotional setting, you are instructing the law to deliver more of what matches it. This isn't about guilt, it's about awakening. Because the moment you see this, you gain power. You realize you don't have to force anything, you simply need to shift the origin point. To select new thought and hold it. Nourish it, protect it from dilution, and in time, the outer begins to reflect it. This is why you must choose your thoughts the way you would choose a seed. If you plant fear, you reap delay. If you plant resentment, you reap resistance. But if you plant clarity, peace, expectancy, life begins to form around that frequency. And yes, it takes persistence. Because you're not just planting new thought, you're dissolving the old ones that have been taking up space for years. You may feel tension as the old and new collide. That's normal. That's growth. You are reshaping the structure of your inner world, and the outer will catch up. But first, it begins with a thought, a new one that says, I am no longer thinking by habit, I am thinking by truth. One that says, my thoughts are not neutral. They are the first cause, and I now take that seriously. One that says, what I repeatedly hold in mind, I eventually hold in hand. This is not control through force. This is creation through understanding. As you align your thinking with clarity, your emotions begin to settle. Your actions gain focus. Your days become less chaotic, not because the world has suddenly improved, but because you've stopped sending it conflicting signals. You've begun to unify your inner world, and that unity calls forth order. This is the real discipline, not changing everything around you, but learning to remain faithful to the thoughts that build, rather than break. To stay centered in the truth, even when the old patterns scream for attention. That is how you change your life, one thought at a time. And no one can do that for you. No one can think your thoughts. No one can build your belief. This is the sacred privilege of your own mind. So start now. Choose the thought that empowers, the thought that clears, the thought that aligns. Not just once, but repeatedly, not just in comfort, but in challenge. And watch how the law begins to echo that choice. Because the life you want doesn't begin out there. It begins in the invisible interior space where all creation starts, thought. And from that first cause, everything else follows. If thought is the blueprint, then emotion is the energy that brings it to life. You've heard it said that thoughts become things, but that's only half the picture. Thoughts alone are neutral until they are charged. What gives them shape, weight, and speed is the emotional current that flows through them. Emotion is not an after effect. It is the activator of belief. It determines whether an idea remains idle or becomes a directive to the law. You may think of emotion as something reactive, something that happens when circumstances hit you, but in truth, emotion is a signal. It's a declaration. And whether you know it or not, you are radiating that declaration all the time. Think of a thought like a message written in ink. Without emotion, it's faint, maybe even illegible. But when you infuse it with feeling, that message gets bold, underlined, and pressed into the fabric of your reality. That is how creation happens, not just by thinking, but by feeling what you think. This is why surface affirmations often fail. You can say, "I am abundant," all day long, but if your emotional atmosphere is saturated with worry, lack, and fear, the law of mind responds to that. Not your words, but your vibration. Not your statement, but your state. The question, then, is not just what am I thinking, but how do I feel when I think it? When you think of your desire, do you feel anticipation or pressure, relief or resistance, clarity or confusion? The emotional signature reveals the true belief, no matter what you claim consciously. And this is not cause for shame. It's your spiritual compass. It shows you where your alignment is real and where it's still being negotiated. The goal is not to suppress emotion, but to listen to it, to ask, what am I energizing with this feeling? What am I broadcasting with this tone? Emotions are not interruptions on the spiritual path. They are the spiritual path. They show you where you stand in relation to truth. When you're in resonance with your higher knowing, peace follows, even in chaos. When you're in conflict with your own good, discomfort arrives, even in quiet rooms. This is not punishment, it's feedback. And feedback is power. Because once you recognize that emotion fuels creation, you stop being casual with your inner climate. You stop indulging in cycles of self-pity, not because it's wrong, but because it's expensive. Every emotion you allow to live inside you long enough becomes a silent instruction to the law. This is why you can't afford to stay in resentment, why you must interrupt the loop of fear, why you must treat inner peace not as luxury, but as strategy. Not because it looks spiritual, but because it is effective. You don't need to feel amazing all the time. That's not the point. The point is to recognize that emotion is guidance. It tells you what kind of outcome you are magnetizing. It helps you adjust in real time before the pattern cements itself in form. This is not about controlling emotion. It's about choosing what you dwell in. You may feel anger rise, but you don't have to nurture it. You may notice fear, but you don't have to feed it. You get to say, "This is not the emotional frequency I want to create from, and I choose differently now." It takes practice. It takes awareness. And most of all, it takes responsibility. Because once you know that emotion is fuel, you stop acting as if you're a victim of the world and start acting as if you're the initiator of it. Think about it. When you recall a painful memory and feel it all over again, you're not just remembering, you're reactivating. When you imagine a joyful outcome and feel it in your body, you're not just fantasizing, you're transmitting. The law of belief doesn't sort between real and imagined. It only reads frequency, and that frequency is shaped by your sustained emotional tone. So if you want to shift your experience, don't just change your thoughts, change how you feel them. Let this be your practice, not forced positivity, but chosen alignment. Let the vision you hold evoke the feeling of peace now, not later. Let your belief carry a frequency of knowing, not hoping. Let your desire come alive inside you, not just as concept, but as felt reality. This is the path walked by every great teacher of truth, not through blind faith, not through empty detachment, but through emotional mastery, through choosing again and again to occupy the emotional atmosphere that matches the result already claimed. You do not need to wait for circumstances to feel peace. You need to feel peace so circumstances can align. That is the reversal of the old way. That is the true direction of power. And when you hold that vibration, when you dwell in the feeling of what is desired as if it were already real, you awaken the law in your favor. You shorten the distance between vision and form. You train the world to respond not to what you say, but to what you vibrate. Because you are not just a thinker, you are a feeler, a resonator, a broadcast tower, and every day, whether you intend it or not, you are sending signals into the field of life. Thought gives them shape. Emotion gives them strength. So guard your feeling tone, choose it with care, cultivate it with devotion, and let every thought you hold be carried on the wings of a feeling that matches its truth. That is how creation works. That is how the invisible becomes real. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the presence of substance, a quality of mind that sees beyond appearances and aligns with deeper reality. It's not wishful thinking. It's not naive optimism. It is precision, structure, direction. And when activated consciously, it moves through your life like fire through fog. Most people think of faith as something vague or mystical, a feeling perhaps, a blind leap into the unknown. But faith, as the ancients taught, is far more practical than that. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that word, substance, is not poetic. It means something. Faith gives unseen ideas form in your consciousness. It makes what is spiritual tangible, first in your inner world, then in the outer. But to wield it, you must first understand what it is not. Faith is not pretending. It is not convincing yourself through sheer repetition. It is not forcing a smile over confusion. Real faith does not resist appearances. It looks through them, not to deny the facts, but to transcend them by connecting with higher truth. There is a world of difference between ignoring a problem and seeing it through the eyes of spiritual law. One is repression, the other is mastery. Faith does not need to feel ecstatic. It doesn't require emotional highs. Faith can feel calm, steady, unshaken. Sometimes it feels like silence, other times like quiet determination. But always it carries a tone of certainty, not that everything will be easy, but that everything will be answered. Faith is not passive. It is active. It is a mental posture that says, "This is already mine in principle, and I now live as though it were so." It shifts you from longing to living, from hoping to embodying, from one day to now. This is what separates those who repeat affirmations from those who radiate results. The ones who move mountains are not louder, they are more aligned. Their inner atmosphere is so consistent that it leaves no room for contradiction. They have trained their awareness to dwell in the end, not the beginning. This is why imagination plays such a powerful role in faith. Not imagination as escape, but as rehearsal. As Neville Goddard taught, imagination is the spiritual workshop where your future is made present. When you imagine an outcome vividly and emotionally dwell in it, you give it structure in the unseen. And when you repeat that dwelling with faith, the law begins to accept it as instruction. You don't need to know how. The law does not require your strategy. It requires your decision, your willingness to stand in the unseen and say, "This is real to me now." Faith is that willingness, not to manipulate life, but to trust that when the inner world aligns with truth, the outer cannot help but follow. This is not denial. This is dominion. You may not yet see the outcome, But you can live as if you've already received it, not to fake your way through life, but to become the kind of person who naturally welcomes the thing you desire. Because the truth is this: you do not manifest what you ask for. You manifest what you are aligned with. What you feel is already yours, what you prepare for without flinching, what you accept as natural to your identity. And faith is what creates that alignment. So stop thinking of it as something soft. It is the strongest force you can cultivate. It cuts through fear. It silences indecision. It organizes your thoughts, tones your feelings, and points your entire energy system in one direction. Without it, you drift. With it, you become a tuning fork for your highest reality. And yes, you will be tested. Not by a cosmic jury, but by the residue of your old patterns. Your previous assumptions will rise. The doubts you inherited will try to reclaim you. But this is where faith reveals its weight, not as a concept, but as your stance in the middle of contradiction. Faith doesn't collapse when things don't appear to change. It stands, it returns, it remembers. And because it does, it eventually reconfigures the very reality that once defied it. You may wonder, but what if I don't feel that faith yet? That's okay. Faith is not a mood, it's a practice. It is built moment by moment, thought by thought, action by action. You strengthen it by choosing it again and again until it becomes the default setting of your awareness. You don't have to feel heroic. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to stop siding with fear and start building your residence in the realm of your chosen belief. That is enough, and that is powerful. So when you speak your desire, speak it with structure. Let your words be matched by mental pictures, emotional certainty, and daily movement. Let your inner world become a match to the thing you claim to want. And watch as life answers, not always in the way you expect, but always in the way that aligns. Because faith, once embodied, is not fragile. It is fire, it is substance, and it never returns void. The greatest obstacle to answered prayer is not disbelief, it is divided belief, not outright rejection of truth, but internal contradiction. You say one thing with your lips and another with your emotions. You affirm abundance, yet expect interruption. You visualize healing, but prepare for relapse. You declare peace while rehearsing the next conflict in your mind. This is not hypocrisy, it's unconsciousness, and it's more common than most realize, because belief is not measured by what you say once, it's measured by what you live inside of consistently. And when two opposing beliefs battle for dominance in your mind, the stronger always wins, not the louder, not the most virtuous, but the most emotionally energized. This is why you must be careful with casual thinking. Every time you revisit the story of failure, the memory of pain, the prediction of struggle, you feed the competing belief. You pour energy into the very frequency you claim to be transcending, and the law, always precise, reflects the one you energize most. It's not personal. It's mechanical. A divided house cannot stand, not because it's immoral, but because it's unstable. The same is true in consciousness. A divided belief sends mixed instructions to the creative law, and mixed instructions yield scattered results. You've seen this. A period of hope followed by disappointment. A breakthrough that fizzles into delay. A moment of clarity drowned by old fears. These are not failures. They are feedback. They're telling you that one part of you believes and another part doesn't. And the part that doesn't believe still holds the wheel. This is where true inner work begins, not in adding more positivity, but in dissolving the contradiction, in finding the root of the counter-belief and confronting it, not with shame, but with clarity. Ask yourself, what belief would have to be true for this pattern to keep showing up, not just intellectually, but emotionally? What are you still assuming? What are you still expecting? You might uncover thoughts like, good things don't last for me. I'll get close, but not quite there. People like me always have to struggle. I'm not ready yet. These thoughts may not be spoken, but they're felt. And what's felt is what's believed. The good news is this: Once you bring them into the light, they lose power. You can challenge them, replace them, not with hollow declarations, but with chosen, practiced conviction. It's not enough to believe in the new. You must stop feeding the old, because every moment you dwell in the old assumption, you reinforce the old result. You can't say, "I am free," while still emotionally preparing for chains. You can't say, "I trust the process," while secretly planning for disappointment. That's not belief, it's division, and division weakens the signal. This is why spiritual teachers across time emphasized singleness of purpose, not because variety is bad, but because clarity is power. When your whole system, thought, emotion, expectation, is pointed in one direction, you become a magnet for that reality. But when your belief is split, your energy is diluted. And diluted energy does not create decisively, it creates delay, distortion, and detour. You've likely felt the difference. Those rare moments where you were fully aligned, even just for a second. No doubt, no second guessing, just inner yes. In those moments, life moved. Doors opened, people appeared, circumstances bent toward you. That wasn't chance. That was coherence. Now imagine cultivating that coherence intentionally, not as a moment, but as a lifestyle. Imagine building a belief so stable that contradiction has no place to hide. Imagine how quickly life would respond to a consciousness with no internal war. That is not fantasy. That is discipline. And it begins with noticing where you are divided, where you still flinch inwardly while claiming outward certainty, where the old voice still whispers, "Don't get your hopes up," and part of you still listens. It's not about guilt, it's about choice. You must choose which voice gets to live. You must decide which belief becomes your identity, and once you do, you must stop returning to the other out of habit. Because the law does not respond to your history, it responds to your dominant conviction. If your conviction is that struggle is normal, then even success will find a way to collapse. If your conviction is that good cannot last, then even miracles will find a ceiling. But if your conviction shifts, if you decide that peace is your birthright, that abundance is natural, that clarity is available now, then the law reorients around that belief, and the contradiction begins to dissolve. This isn't about pretending, it's about aligning, not through force, but through awareness, through being radically honest about what you're really believing, and then choosing again and again the one that reflects your highest truth. Because once belief becomes undivided, results accelerate. Not because the law changes, but because you did. You got out of your own way. You stopped sending conflicting signals. You unified your attention. And in that unification, creation became inevitable. That is the power of coherent belief. That is what the law waits for. Not perfection, but clarity. So if you're ready to see different results, stop asking for more signs and start eliminating contradiction. Let your belief become whole. Let your conviction become stable. Let your inner atmosphere match the thing you say you desire. And the law will echo it clearly, consistently, completely. Prayer never fails. But people do misunderstand what it is. Most think of prayer as asking, pleading, sending requests into the sky and hoping for response. But prayer, in its truest form, is not a petition. It is a position. It is the aligning of consciousness with a greater truth. And from that alignment, the law begins to move. So why does it sometimes seem like prayer goes unanswered? Because what is called prayer is often a mask for doubt, confusion, or desperation. It sounds spiritual. It sounds faithful. But beneath the surface, the vibration says, "This probably won't work. I don't deserve this. Please fix what I fear can't be fixed." The words are not what the law hears. The tone is. And if the tone is one of uncertainty, then the law reflects uncertainty. Not out of punishment, but precision. It mirrors the state you dwell in, not the request you recite. You must understand, the law does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are in harmony with. And if your prayer is laced with contradiction, you are sending mixed signals. You are saying yes and no at the same time, and the result is silence. That silence is not rejection. It's a reflection of the static. You might pray for abundance while vibrating in lack. You might ask for peace while your mind rehearses conflict. You might seek guidance while refusing to release control. The words say one thing, but the inner state says another. This is why Neville Goddard said, "Prayer is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not the asking for something, but the dwelling in its alreadiness." It is not about begging for a different future. It is about assuming the present reality of your desire and feeling it fully without strain. This is not a metaphor, it's mechanics. When you enter prayer from the assumption that it's already done, your thoughts, emotions, and imagination unify. You enter the vibration of answered. And from that state you speak, not as one in need, but as one in possession. That kind of prayer never fails, because it doesn't try to create reality. It affirms it. It builds the state from which the world must echo. But let's be honest, it's tempting to pray from fear, to call out in the moment of panic, to rush into affirmation while drowning in doubt. And while that is human, it is not creative. It is reactive. The power of prayer is not in how eloquently you speak, but in how clearly you believe. This is why spiritual maturity requires discipline. You must become aware of what you're really doing in prayer. Are you aligning, or are you escaping? Are you resting in truth, or are you clinging to fantasy? There is no shame in asking, but if asking becomes a way to avoid changing your state, the law will not respond. Not because it's harsh, but because it cannot be deceived. It will not override your dominant belief, no matter how poetic your request may be. So what is true prayer? True prayer is entering the state of the thing desired, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It is not saying, "Please bring this to me." It is knowing, "This is now part of my reality." And living from that space, even before the evidence appears. When you pray rightly, you are not trying to convince the universe. You are reminding yourself of what is already yours by law. You're stepping into the vibration of completion, and that vibration creates the bridge. Of course, this takes practice. You'll wobble. You'll slip back into asking. You'll feel the pull of old habits, but over time, you'll begin to sense the difference between performative prayer and aligned prayer, between wishful words and actual presence. And when you make that shift, when you stop using prayer to get something and start using it to become someone, you'll notice something extraordinary. Peace arrives before the condition does. Because real prayer changes you, it rewires your center, it unifies your field, and from that unified state, your world reorganizes, not by chance but by law. So the next time you pray, pause. Ask yourself, am I asking from fear or declaring from faith? Am I reinforcing absence or embodying fulfillment? Am I reacting or creating? And then choose your state before you choose your words. Let the silence within you deepen. Let the old noise dissolve. Let the feeling of what's already yours begin to settle in your chest, your breath, your bones. And from that place, not a moment sooner, speak. You will feel the difference. Because the law doesn't respond to what you say in prayer. It responds to who you are in prayer. And once you become the answered version of yourself, the prayer is already fulfilled. Receiving is not an event, it's a state. You don't receive with your hands, you receive with your consciousness. The answers you seek do not always come with trumpets or lightning bolts. More often they arrive like soft clarity, a subtle knowing, a shift in your emotional temperature. But if you're waiting for a dramatic sign, you may miss the gentle doorway that's already open. This is the quiet art, learning to recognize the language of receiving. It is not spoken in volume, but in alignment, not with sound, but with signal. The truth is, most people are trained to request, but not to receive. They're comfortable with asking, visualizing, affirming, but when the answer begins to appear, they resist. Not consciously, But inwardly, the emotional tone does not match the thing desired, and the law, ever accurate, cannot deliver what the inner state does not permit. Receiving is not passive, it is receptive. It means being tuned to the vibration of the thing you've declared. It means that your inner climate has cleared the space for it, not by begging, but by becoming. This is why so many miss their answer. It didn't look the way they expected. They asked for guidance and felt a quiet urge, but ignored it. They prayed for healing, then dismissed the moment of relief as a coincidence. They affirmed abundance, then turned away from a new opportunity because it didn't arrive in familiar packaging. The law delivers in harmony with your belief, not your preference. If your belief says, "This must be dramatic," then anything subtle is missed. If your belief says, "This can't come easily," then ease is rejected. If your belief says, "It must look like this," then anything outside that picture is invisible, even when it's the answer. To truly receive, you must release the terms. You must stop telling life what the answer must look like and start attuning to the essence of what you've asked for, the feeling of peace, the clarity of direction, the reality of change. These often arrive first as a nudge, a lightness, a shift in perception. And if you catch that signal and anchor into it, the physical form follows. This is what Emmet Fox hinted at when he taught that answered prayer doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stops hurting. Sometimes the anxiety lifts. Sometimes a new path appears without fanfare. And the key is, don't miss it because it's quiet. The inner language of receiving is silence that feels like truth. It's the sense that something inside you has already moved, that you no longer carry the same weight, even if the outer picture hasn't caught up yet. That's not your imagination, that's your answer arriving. But to receive it, you must stay in the room. Don't pray and then walk away from your inner awareness. Don't affirm and then resume the vibration of fear. Stay where the answer lives. Keep your awareness tuned like a receiver waiting to catch the next frequency, not with strain, but with readiness. Receiving requires emotional permission. You must allow yourself to be the one who has, not just momentarily, but repeatedly. You must train your nervous system to feel safe with what you say you want. Because if having it still triggers fear, shame, or guilt, your inner world will delay it. The law does not withhold, but you may block. This isn't punishment, it's a mercy. Life will not deliver what you are not yet a match for. So if something hasn't arrived, ask, have I truly received it inside? Have I made room for it? Have I released the version of me that was tied to not having it? Because answers don't land in crowded spaces. You must clear out the emotional clutter that says, I'm not ready, I don't deserve this, or it's too late. You must allow yourself to feel as if it's already here, without doubt, without apology, even if only for a moment, because that moment becomes the seed of receiving. And the more you dwell in that state, the more natural it becomes. You begin to notice signs you once missed, a phrase that jumps off the page, a conversation that opens a new possibility, a sudden inner peace that says, you're already on the path. These are not random, they are the evidence of alignment. But only the present you can see them. If you keep looking through the lens of who you were when you asked, you'll miss what's appearing now. That's why transformation requires an identity shift. You must become the one who has received, even before the world agrees. Receiving is not just getting, it's recognizing. And to recognize what's being given, you must match its language, not English, not affirmation, but vibration. The silent, subtle resonance of fulfillment. So the next time you pray, the next time you claim, the next time you declare a truth, don't just say it, receive it, breathe with it, walk with it, prepare for it, move through your day as one who knows it's on the way or already arrived. And let that knowing be quiet, but unshakable. Because the universe does not shout its answers, it whispers them. And when your mind becomes still enough to hear, that's when you realize the answer didn't come. It had already been here, You just hadn't tuned in yet. The impossible is not a fact. It is a belief that has gone unchallenged. It wears the costume of reality. It shows up in medical reports, bank statements, cultural patterns, generational narratives. It says, "This is how it's always been." It disguises itself in logic, statistics, and shared fear. And yet, when you trace it back, every impossibility is nothing more than a boundary someone agreed to. Belief doesn't just shift possibility, it redefines it. You've seen this, even if you didn't name it. The person who healed without explanation. The breakthrough that came after decades of being told, never. The idea that disrupted entire industries because someone believed differently. These were not anomalies. They were examples of what happens when belief becomes stronger than conditioning. Belief does not ignore limitation, it transcends it. It recognizes that laws of form, biology, physics, economy, are secondary to the laws of consciousness, because form follows mind, always. What you hold in the unseen will, in time, reshape what is seen. This is not arrogance, this is alignment with principle. The reason people remain stuck is not because they're weak or unworthy, it's because they accept the visible as final. They treat current conditions as the end point rather than the feedback loop of past thinking. And as long as you believe the picture in front of you holds all the truth, you are bound by it. But the moment you say, "This may be the current fact, but it is not the final authority," you reclaim the steering wheel. That's when miracles begin, not because law was suspended, but because law was finally understood. Miracles are not interruptions of natural order. They are expressions of higher order. They are what happens when spiritual law overrides human assumption, and the only requirement is belief, not belief in magic, but in structure, in alignment, in the fact that consciousness is causative. If you believe you are trapped, you will not move. If you believe you are broken, healing will stay delayed. If you believe life is against you, you will organize your attention to confirm it. But if you dare to believe something new, not just once, but repeatedly, you rewire your field. And when the field shifts, the impossible crumbles. This doesn't mean denial. It doesn't mean throwing away reason. It means seeing reason as a servant, not a master. It means recognizing that logic is shaped by belief, not the other way around. That what's realistic is not fixed. It's fluid, constantly recalibrated by the state of your consciousness. People who shift the impossible are not reckless. They are committed. They have trained their inner world to remain stable, even when the outer world insists on collapse. They don't need evidence to believe. They believe, and so the evidence comes. This is the reversal of old logic. In spiritual law, belief precedes manifestation. It does not follow it. If you're waiting to see it before you believe it, you are locked in delay. But if you live from the state of already done, even when nothing around you agrees, you've stepped into creative authority. And yes, it will feel lonely at first, because most people are still hypnotized by appearances. They need consensus to feel secure. But you are being called into a different posture, not arrogance, not superiority, but sovereignty. The quiet knowing that your inner world holds more weight than the outer one. This is not philosophy. This is function. The person who believes consistently and emotionally in a new possibility, despite evidence, will eventually see the world conform. Because that's how law works, not on a timer, not on demand, but with precision once belief becomes dominant. And what was once impossible becomes inevitable. You've already experienced this on small scales. You shifted a belief, and suddenly the resistance disappeared. A door opened. An answer came. Not because you figured it out, but because you stopped doubting long enough for the law to deliver. Now imagine applying that same clarity to something bigger, something that's haunted you, something you've called impossible, not because it is, but because you've rehearsed that label for too long. Ask yourself, who would I be if I no longer believed this was impossible? How would I think, speak, and act if I lived in full alignment with its reality now? That version of you is not a fantasy. It's already alive in you, and belief is what brings it forward. You don't need to force the outer shift. You only need to inhabit the inner state. Let your thoughts, emotions, and imagination agree, not with the past, but with the truth you've chosen. And yes, the old story will try to pull you back. It will point to time, to failure, to history. It will say, be realistic. And that's when you must remember, realistic is often just another word for resigned. But belief is not interested in resignation. It is interested in resurrection. In bringing to life the things you thought were buried. In proving that nothing is final, not until you say it is. So say something new. Say it with conviction, with repetition, with emotional clarity, and say it until your entire system starts to agree. That is when mountains move. That is when laws bend, not to violate truth, but to fulfill it more fully. Because there is no such thing as impossible. There is only one belief not yet claimed. You don't just want new results, you need a new pattern. Because outcomes don't come from effort alone. They emerge from structure, from the unseen architecture of belief that shapes your decisions, your energy, and your expectations. If the structure stays the same, even the most inspired actions eventually collapse into the old pattern. This is why willpower fails, why breakthroughs seem temporary, why you've made progress, only to slide back into familiar limits. It's not because you didn't try hard enough. It's because you were trying to build a new life on an old blueprint. And the blueprint always wins, until it is replaced. The blueprint is your mental construct of what's possible. It holds your definitions of self, of success, of struggle, of worth. It's not just what you think. It's what you assume without question. It's the inner script that says, this is just how things are for me. Maybe you've been carrying it for years. Maybe it was handed to you by family, culture, religion, or a past experience that carved itself into your nervous system. Maybe it says you're the one who always has to work harder, the one who doesn't get chosen, the one who almost, but not quite, arrives. You may not agree with that script anymore, but if you haven't rewritten it, it's still running. And the law responds to it. This is the silent tragedy of unconscious belief. It doesn't require your permission to operate. It just needs your repetition. And if you keep rehearsing the thoughts, emotions, and images that match the old story, it keeps building itself over and over again. So if you're serious about transformation, you must go to the root. You must ask, what assumptions are shaping my experience? Not what you say you believe, but what you feel is normal. What you emotionally expect when no one is watching. That's the true blueprint. And the good news, blueprints can be replaced, but not by accident, not by vague intention, by design, with precision. The same way an architect draws up new plans before tearing down a wall, you must draw up new beliefs, new inner definitions, and install them through practice. Start with clarity. What is the pattern I'm done repeating? Be honest. Is it always being the helper, but never helped? Always starting strong, but burning out? Always attracting chaos just when peace begins? Whatever it is, name it. Bring it out of hiding, because you can't dissolve what you refuse to see. Then ask, what is the new belief I choose? Not just I want peace or I want love. That's vague. Go deeper. Choose something grounded. I now live in relationships that nourish me. I now complete what I begin with calm and focus. I now expect ease without guilt. The more specific the blueprint, the more powerful the shift. Then comes the work, installing that new pattern. This is not about forcing thoughts. It's about consistency, repeating the new image in your mind, feeling it in your body, catching yourself when the old voice rises, and choosing again and again the new response. Every time you do, you weaken the old wiring. And every time you visualize the new with emotion, every time you live in it inwardly, you lay down new grooves in your consciousness. The law begins to notice. The field starts to bend. Reality doesn't shift in one grand event. It shifts through steady realignment. You may feel resistance. That's normal. Your nervous system has been trained by repetition, not truth. So you may feel the echo of old beliefs pulling at you. You may have days where doubt screams and clarity whispers. That doesn't mean the new belief isn't working. It means the old one is dying. And death, even of illusions, can be noisy. So stay with it. When the old thought comes, recognize it, but don't host it. Don't rehearse it. Don't decorate it. Just see it as a visitor, not a resident. Then return to your new blueprint, not as a fight, but as a choice. Over time, the new belief becomes easier. It stops feeling like pretending and starts feeling like remembering. Your emotions begin to match it. Your reactions soften. And most importantly, your results begin to change. Not because the world finally decided to favor you, but because you stopped projecting an old pattern onto it. This is what true transformation is. Not surface behavior, but inner replacement. Not patchwork improvements, but blueprint-level revision. And the one who rewrites the blueprint rewrites the outcome. So ask yourself, am I building from an old map, or am I ready to draw a new one? Because the law is not loyal to your past. It is loyal to your present pattern. And the moment that pattern shifts, so does everything else. Persistence is not about trying harder. It's about refusing to move inwardly, no matter what seems to be happening outwardly. It is the choice to stand inside your belief, not as a guest, but as the builder of your reality. And that choice, made repeatedly, becomes your power. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they're wrong. They fail because they stop. They abandon alignment too early. They get swayed by appearances, distracted by delays, worn down by evidence that hasn't caught up yet. And in that hesitation, they re-enter the old vibration. But the ones who persist, they keep holding the tone. They don't beg for results. They become the result. They don't measure progress by what they see, but by how faithful they've stayed to the inner world they've chosen. This is the essence of spiritual persistence, not forcing the law to obey, but remaining aligned long enough for it to respond. Persistence isn't noise, it's stability. It's the quiet conviction that says, this is already mine in substance. Now I walk in the direction of its appearance. Not with strain, not with desperation, but with calm certainty. You see, most people confuse persistence with struggle, but true persistence is rooted in peace. It doesn't shout, it doesn't grasp, it doesn't push, it simply holds. And it holds until the outer must rearrange itself in obedience to the new inner vibration. Think of it like tuning a frequency. The moment your belief locks in, the law begins to echo. But if you change the channel every time you get bored, scared, or impatient, the signal gets scrambled. You don't lose power. You just keep resetting it. And the law waits, not as punishment, but in precision, for consistency. This is why emotional stability matters more than emotional highs. It's not about staying inspired. It's about staying aligned, even on the dull days, even when nothing seems to be shifting, even when the voice of doubt says, it's not working. Because the real shift doesn't happen when everything is easy. It happens when you choose belief, despite appearances. When you decide, again and again, I will not return to the old narrative, not because I'm stubborn, but because I've seen what truth does when I hold it. That is persistence. And it is the spiritual muscle most people never train. They want fast results. They want signs. They want proof. And when it doesn't come fast enough, they slide back into old assumptions. Not because those assumptions are true, but because they are familiar. And that's the real test. Not just what you believe in moments of clarity, but what you return to when the clouds come. Persistence is returning to peace when fear rises, returning to vision when delays appear, returning to identity when doubt tries to tell you who you used to be, returning until returning becomes remaining. And when you remain, when your inner stance becomes unwavering, the world must reflect it, not because you demanded, but because you held the line. That's when results start to shift suddenly. That's when others call it luck or miracle. But you'll know better. You'll know it wasn't sudden at all. It was the harvest of every unseen moment when you refused to give up your state. This is what separates the spiritual dabbler from the true practitioner. One chases the next method. The other deepens into the same truth until it becomes embodied. You must decide who you are in the waiting. Are you the one who adjusts belief to match appearances, or the one who stays with belief until appearances adjust? If the latter, you are walking in power. Because the law doesn't reward persistence. It responds to it. It receives your repeated vibration as instruction. And the more consistently you hold it, the more momentum builds, until reality bends, not as favor, but as reflection. This is not easy, but it is simple. Hold the vision, speak the truth, live from the end, and when the doubt comes, and it will, don't fight it, don't collapse into it, just nod and return to peace, return to clarity, return to the self that knows. Because that return, made again and again, becomes your new center. And from that center, the world is reshaped, not in a burst of magic, but in the steady flow of spiritual law, meeting unwavering conviction. So don't measure by time, don't measure by appearances, measure by alignment, measure by how long you've stayed centered, even when nothing outside justified it, because that is power, that is creation, that is the persistence that rewrites outcomes, and it is yours now. The law is not something you turn on when you meditate, pray, or visualize. It is not activated by ritual or reserved for spiritual moments. It does not sleep, pause, or take breaks on weekends. The law is always on, constantly responding, constantly echoing, constantly shaping form out of the formless based on what you are consistently being. This is the sobering truth most avoid. The law is always working, whether you use it consciously or not. Like gravity, it does not care whether you understand it. Like electricity, it doesn't adjust itself based on your emotions. It simply responds. Faithfully, without favoritism, without exception. You may think, but I didn't mean for this to happen. No, perhaps not consciously. But your consistent vibration, your sustained thoughts, feelings, expectations, meant it. That's what the law received. That's what it responded to. This is not to condemn, it's to empower. Because once you accept that the law is always functioning, you stop living as a spiritual tourist. You stop treating prayer and belief as something to visit. You start recognizing that every moment is creation, every thought is a seed, every assumption is a cause set in motion. And the question is no longer, is the law working? It's, what is it working on right now through me? Because you are never not creating. You are always sending signals. The law doesn't wait for silence or candles. It reads you now, while you scroll, while you complain, while you celebrate, while you wonder what's next. It hears the vibration beneath the words, the emotion behind the action, the state beneath the effort, and it builds from that. If you believe life is hard, it won't argue, it will confirm. If you believe you always get left behind, the law will start rearranging things to match. If you believe healing is natural, doors will begin to open in places you never thought to look. But if you go back and forth, if you shift your signal every day, the law doesn't punish you. It simply reflects instability. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. This is why your greatest spiritual responsibility is consistency, not perfection, not intensity, but steadiness. A steady belief, a steady feeling, a steady image in mind. That is what makes the law clear. That is what allows creation to stabilize and manifest in your physical world. You are not waiting for power. You are not hoping for favor. You are wielding the law every time you think, every time you assume, every time you react. And when you start living with that awareness, everything changes. You stop blaming. You stop waiting. You stop outsourcing your authority. And instead, you start to live like someone who knows, I am always broadcasting, and the universe is always mirroring. No exceptions. This doesn't mean you never feel fear. It doesn't mean you never waver. It means that when you do, you catch it. You return to alignment. You take accountability not just for your actions, but for your inner tone. Because you understand, the law doesn't respond to moments. It responds to momentum. And your momentum is built by repetition, not dramatic declarations, but repeated returns to the same inner truth. So if your life isn't changing, ask, what vibration have I made normal? Have you normalized waiting, worry, frustration? Have you made it emotionally familiar to rehearse doubt, just in case things fall apart? If so, don't shame yourself. Just notice and shift. Because the law is not offended by delay, it's just waiting for clarity. And the moment you become clear, the moment your belief stops stuttering, the law rushes to reflect the new instruction. There's no lag in spirit. There's only lag in your readiness to be consistent. Let that truth cut through the fog. Let it sober you and strengthen you. You don't need to try harder. You need to remember longer. You don't need louder rituals. You need quieter stability. The law is not moved by emotional volume. It is moved by emotional resonance. So stop trying to make things happen. Instead, make your state happen. Make peace normal. Make fulfillment feel familiar. Make gratitude so steady that the law begins responding not as a reward, but as the only thing it can do in your presence. Because you are not waiting for the law, you are simply deciding how you'll use it, and once you use it with consistency, reverence, and courage, it delivers, not as magic, but as law. Always on, always fair, always mirroring, and always available to the one who takes responsibility for the signal they send. You never rise above the identity you hold of yourself. No matter how many affirmations you repeat, how many books you read, or how deeply you visualize, if your core identity remains unchanged, your life will orbit the same results. Because identity is not surface level. It is the root vibration from which all thought, emotion, and behavior emerge. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are, what you consistently believe yourself to be. This is the hidden engine behind manifestation, not effort, not mere repetition, but identity. The self-image you carry beneath every action, the silent narrative you believe when you're not trying to believe anything at all. It shapes your interpretation of reality. It determines what you think is available, what feels natural, and what you unconsciously resist, even when you say you want it. If you believe you're always struggling, you'll find ways to keep struggle alive. If you believe you're second best, no amount of outer praise will stick. If you believe you are unworthy of peace, then chaos will feel strangely comfortable, even if you don't like it. And the worst part? You won't even realize it's happening. Because identity is so familiar, it becomes invisible. You call it your personality, your story, your truth. But in reality, it's just an agreement, a repeated conclusion forged over time that now acts as law in your world, until you change it. You must understand, identity is not fixed. It's programmable, rewritable, moldable. But only if you stop defending it, only if you stop protecting the version of you that keeps recreating the life you say you no longer want. Many people try to change outcomes without changing self-concept. They treat belief like a strategy, but keep the old identity intact. They say, I'm going to manifest abundance, while still believing deep down, I'm the one who never has enough. They visualize a relationship, while secretly believing, no one really chooses me. That is not alignment, that is friction. And the law hears the friction, not the affirmation. If you want to experience real, lasting change, you must upgrade the image of who you are, not just in words but in vibration, in the emotional tone you associate with your name, in the way you carry yourself internally when you wake up in the morning, in what you expect to be true for you without forcing it. This is not about ego, it's about permission. You are only allowed to experience what your identity says is normal. So if you want a different life, normalize a different self. This is what Neville meant by living in the end. Not just visualizing the outcome, but becoming the person for whom that outcome is natural. That's where the shift happens, not at the level of doing, but of being. You don't need to prove anything. You need to decide who you are now. You don't need to wait for the world to treat you differently. You need to treat yourself differently, and let the world catch up. This is how the law begins to organize your experience differently. It doesn't obey the version of you that wants change. It obeys the version of you that has already changed. That version of you doesn't have to work harder. They think differently. They feel differently. They assume differently. And from those assumptions, they move through life without resistance. But to become that version, you must stop identifying with the old roles: the struggler, the survivor, the outsider, the fixer, the one who always, almost. Those roles may have kept you safe once, but they are not the truth of who you are. They are just costumes, and you can take them off. Ask yourself now, who would I be if I no longer believed I was limited? What would feel natural to me if I believed I was fully supported? What would I allow if I believed I was deeply worthy without condition? Those aren't fantasies, they are blueprints. And when you begin to feel your way into them, you start tuning to a new reality, not by effort, but by embodiment. You may stumble, you may forget. You may feel the pull of the old identity whispering, "Come back." But your job is not to argue with it, it's to replace it. Not with force, with repetition, with resonance, with truth. And soon, what once felt fake becomes your new normal. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The law didn't finally bless you. It simply recognized who you became. So if you're waiting for something to shift, don't ask, "How do I get it?" Ask, "Who do I need to become so that it has nowhere else to go but into my life?" That's the root of all creation, because when identity changes, everything changes. There comes a moment on the spiritual path when asking must end. Not because desire is wrong, but because desire, unfulfilled, must eventually become embodiment. If you keep asking, you remain in the vibration of absence. But when you live from the answered state, you step into the law as a co-creator, not a beggar, not a seeker, but a participant in your own unfolding. Living from the answered state is not pretending. It is the most honest thing you can do. It's saying, if I truly believe this prayer was already answered, how would I think? How would I walk? How would I speak to others? How would I meet this day? Then doing exactly that. Because that behavior is not performance, it's alignment. It's the outer expression of an inner claim. It's how you move belief from concept to command. You've already seen what happens when you live from the state of not having. You make decisions based on fear. You withhold joy until. You shrink your vision. You delay your peace. And life, always obedient, reflects that version of you. But when you flip the current, when you start living as the one who has, the law takes notice. Not because it's watching, but because the signal has changed, and everything you truly believe to be yours begins to move toward you. This is what it means to walk in faith, not to convince yourself, but to act from your conviction. You're no longer saying, "I hope it happens." You're saying, "It has happened." In principle, in consciousness. And I am now allowing life to reflect that truth in form. That shift is subtle, but revolutionary. Suddenly, you stop reacting to delays. You stop measuring progress with anxiety. You stop needing signs every 10 minutes to keep going. Instead, you rest. Not in passivity, but in inner certainty. A kind of settled energy that says, "I've chosen my state, and I'm not leaving it." That's when you know your belief is real, because real belief doesn't flinch every time the world disagrees. It stays. It deepens. It lives from the answer, even before the package arrives at the door. This is not delusion. It's spiritual mechanics. The law cannot deliver what you do not claim, not in theory, in being. So look around, not with panic, but with clarity. What patterns are still asking you to prove yourself? What parts of you are still waiting to be convinced? What areas are still driven by, what if it never happens? Bring those parts into the answered state, not by fixing them, by occupying the version of you that already has what you once hoped for. Feel their posture, hear their inner dialogue, see their decisions, practice them, not later. Now, because now is the only point where the law can meet you. You may say, but I don't feel it yet. That's okay. Begin anyway. Embodiment doesn't mean waiting for the right emotion. It means choosing the right identity, even when the emotions are still catching up. And if you fall out of it, return. Return again and again until it becomes your home. Because the more you dwell in the answered state, the more the world conforms, not as a bribe, but as a mirror. You'll notice little things first. Your language softens, your decisions sharpen, your nervous system relaxes. Then bigger things begin to move, opportunities, timing, connections, not because you chase them, but because you aligned with the version of yourself who always had access to them. That version of you was never missing. They were waiting for you to stop waiting. So live from your answered prayer. Don't revisit it. Don't keep checking the mailbox. Don't wonder if it's working. Let your walk, your choices, your energy prove that it already has. And the law will follow your lead, not as a reward, but as a reflection. Because once you live from the state of answered, life has no choice but to become it. Now, we slow down. Not because the journey ends, but because something in you has remembered what never left. You have not been waiting for power. You are power. You have not been seeking answers. You are the field in which answers unfold. You have not been lost. You simply believed in a version of yourself that forgot the truth. And now the forgetting ends. You are the thinker, the feeler, the broadcaster, the one who chooses, the one who returns. You are not at the mercy of conditions. You are the cause behind them. Every belief you reinforce becomes a reality under construction, and every state you embody becomes the path beneath your feet. So rest here. Let your breath catch up with your becoming. You don't need to grasp for the next insight. You've already received what you needed, maybe not in dramatic fireworks, but in the slow, steady rewiring of how you see, how you believe, and how you show up to your own mind. You now know the law, and more importantly, you know yourself. So move forward, not with striving, but with presence. Let the world be your echo. Let peace be your proof. And if ever the doubt returns, don't panic. Just return to the state. The law is still on. The light has never failed, and neither have you.